Hello, everybody. Today we are going to be rambling about Hollow Knight, Silksong. This will be a review of sorts, though not a very structured one. I do have some bullets written down on a piece of paper here to help organize my thoughts a little bit. They just say gameplay, narrative, Metroidvania genre, music, difficulty, so just a few things to help, keep me on track, as it were. But this is going to be a pretty freewheeling little review of the game, and as we are yapping, I'm just going to be mopping up some of the things in Silksong that I missed. Knocking out some of the last percentages that I need for 100% and such. So, let's jump into it and start with the most significant part of the game, the most significant part of most games, which is, of course, the gameplay. So, the gameplay of Hollow Knight is brilliant. The combat, the movement is so smooth and satisfying. You're so agile and fluid, and when you're fighting enemies, sort of flowing from like a claw grapple to a pogo to a whatever, to maybe a silk skill, it all flows so nicely. Now, to be honest, I'm kind of a boring player. I often don't make use of my full suite of abilities. This is the case in many games that I play. I tend to play very simply, and so in Silksong I'm the same way. I just mostly use my needle. But I do recognize the fluidity and the elegance of the movement and combat and how it all ties together. And, I think they absolutely knocked it out of the park in the game feel department. The abilities, everything works so well together. On that note, they also have a wonderful diversity of gameplay styles, depending on which crest you use. All of the crests play quite differently. Some of them have huge changes in both the tools that you can equip and, things like your bind and special powers that the crest has. So I really respect that diversity. Again, once I found the Reaper crest, I never messed around with any of the other crests, but I appreciate that those options are in the game. And I have seen videos of people online, using all those other crests, which I think is cool. The enemy design and boss design is fantastic. There might be something to be said for a few too many flying enemies that kind of back up and throw things at you. And that was, when you're fighting a lot of those, that gets kind of annoying, but it wasn't all the time. I didn't think it was a huge deal. But the kind of peak of their enemy design for me was in the bosses. The bosses in Silksong are, by and large, so wonderfully designed, so fun to fight against. Some of my favorites are the Clockwork Dancers and the First Sinner. Those two are, kind of top of mind for some of my favorite bosses in the game. But I also really liked Widow and Phantom. I'm trying to think if there's any bosses that I thought were really kind of duds. The only one that stands out is Grohl, but that's really just because of the run back. He was a fine boss. Not a super interesting one, honestly. Just the only thing that makes him stand out is that god-awful run back. Yeah, obviously the Savage Beastfly has gotten a lot of hate online. I kind of understand why. Any boss that summons minions tends to be kind of tricky, but I think also something about the Savage Beastfly, it has it has like an infinite range of heights that it can do its charge attack from. And I don't know, this might not be right, but I feel like to me, that's where the difficulty comes in, because you place the Beastfly at a certain elevation based on where you are, which then determines where he's going to charge. And the elevation that the Beastfly charges at can be a real pain, depending on what abilities you have. So, I think if the Beastfly was if he had, 3 discrete levels, maybe a high charge where he would pass right over you and you just had to be calm and not jump into it. And then a ground level one where you had to jump and pogo over it. And then maybe like a middle one where, you had to jump and pogo over it, but it was also risky because you had to get even more height than the lower one. If you just had those 3 elevations, I think that would resolve some of the boss's issues. But, to be honest, I didn't find him he was annoying. I didn't enjoy fighting him. I don't think that he was a fun boss, but I didn't really get stuck on him the way that a lot of people online did, so I can't speak to that too much. But overall, the gameplay in Silksong is just phenomenal. I think it really only improves on the gameplay from the original Hollow Knight, and I just adore it. to critique a certain element of it, I might say, well, one would be shard farming. This wasn't really a big deal for me because I just never used my tools until the end of the game. But anytime I'm put in a situation where I'm at risk of having to farm, I'm going to kind of do anything I can to avoid farming. And so in the case of shell shards, the idea of using my shell shards on a boss, and then losing to the boss over and over again, and then burning through all my shell shards, and then having to go farm shell shards, I was like, there's not a chance in hell that I'm doing that. And the tricky thing there is that if you get used to fighting the boss, using your tools, you know, once you run out of tools, you're not going to want to fight the boss without your tools, because then you're going to kind of have to relearn the boss in some ways. And you could choose to do that if you wanted, but I understand most people would be like, I just want to go get my tools back. So, it's kind of like an Elden Ring or any other game where there's like consumables. Runs into that consumables problem. It's a very classic video game thing where you're like, I'm not going to drink my health potions because I need to save them for the final boss, or, you know, sometime when it gets really hard. And then you get to the end of the game and you've got 10,000 potions in your inventory because you never drank any of them. And I don't really know how to solve that problem. If you want tools to not be spammed, you know, you're kind of forced to say, well, maybe there needs to be a resource cost, but then if there's a resource cost, yada yada. So it's a tricky thing. I don't think that it worked out well, in my opinion. But maybe if there was like, I don't know, when you hit enemies, it was kind of like a second resource, like Silk. When you hit enemies, you know, you gathered their shell shards, and then your shell shards reset to 0 when you were at a bench or something, and you had to have shards to use tools on the fly. I don't know, that's just a random idea, but maybe the tools are free, but you can hold fewer of them. And then something like the Architect Crest just lets you have more tools. I don't know, I don't know how to fix it, but when I see a system like that, what it makes me say is, I'm not going to engage with that system because I don't want to end up in the tedious place of farming for shell shards. And then, around the time that I got to the final boss, I was like, okay, I have max shell shards, and I've got all these shell shard items in my inventory. I don't have to worry about this anymore, and so then I started using the flint slate. If I were also to think of another gameplay critique, I would say Act 3 I found kind of boring from a gameplay perspective. You know, the premise of it is that now enemies can be corrupted by the void, and they get a lot stronger, and they start dealing more damage, and they have these new void attacks that they can do. And I don't have a problem with that. In theory, I think it's a fun idea. But in practice, I found that it just kind of made, I don't know, it made fights more samey, because enemies that used to be entirely different were now doing all of the same attacks. obviously they still had their base attacks, which were different, but I don't know, I just got pretty sick of the void enemies, to be honest. Especially because they had more health than their basic counterparts, and so you just ended up in this position where they felt kind of like tanky, and they were doing a lot of damage, and their attacks weren't super interesting. Or those husk clusters, which were just, sacks of hit points that took a long time to kill one, even if there were no enemies around. And when I say a long time, I mean it's, 45 seconds, 30 seconds probably. But yeah, I didn't care too much for the void-touched enemies at the end, even though I thought it was a fun idea in theory, and I liked the narrative of it. Yeah, I guess I'll say platforming. I won't linger on this too long, but I think the platforming in Silksong is a lot of fun. Doing Mount Faye was a lot of fun, sort of speeding through those segments with the timer of the cold ticking down on you. It was great. So, the platforming, A+, they have a great foundation for fun platforming. And I'll be excited to see if they kind of expand on that in some of the DLC. But yeah, I think that's all I have to say about the gameplay. Obviously, there's a ton of tools and stuff, so there's a lot of room for build diversity, and even though I played in a boring way, I've had a lot of fun watching YouTubers make videos where it's like defeating Lost Place without moving at all. And they just sit there with the Architect's Crest, juicing up on lifeblood, and releasing swarms of cogflies, and they just tank all the hits, and I think that's super funny. And it's, it's fun that you can play that way and come up with those kinds of solutions to defeat bosses. There's a lot of build diversity there that I enjoy. Even though I don't engage with it, it's fun to watch other people engage with it. But let's take a look at my bullet points, because I think that's all I have to say about gameplay. I could talk, a lot more about bosses that I loved, but, this is a general review. So the next bullet on my list is narrative. So, just kind of everything from the plot line to the setting to the characters. This is where I will probably become a little more critical of the game. I'll start with the positives, which is primarily that I love the characters. I think they've written some wonderful characters. I think it's an absolutely wonderful, charming thing that they did in Silksong, where you can make every character sing by playing your needle in. And you get to listen to their song and read the lyrics of their song. And it's such a charming way to connect you with the characters. I think it's absolutely wonderful and a great choice, because when you can listen to how characters like Grindel sing, or Sherma or Garmond or whatever, you just see their personality so strongly. connects you to them more deeply. Yeah, so I loved the characters. Some of them had wonderful, stories. Garmin and Zaza, they're just gonna stay with me. That's an incredible story. Such a sad ending. If you're unfamiliar, and I'll put a spoiler warning at the beginning of this video because it's obvious it's a review, but basically you meet Garmin and Zaza, and Garmin is this warrior whose village was destroyed by the Citadel, and Zaza is his faithful mount. And you meet them across Farloom and fight enemies together, and Garmin is this sort of eternally optimistic warrior. And then at the end of the game, you find Zaza. I think I talked about this in my last video, now that I think about it. But anyway, Zaza leads you to Garmin's body, and he's been corrupted by the void, and you have to put him down. And then Zaza stays by his body. It's just so touching and tragic. But yeah, I do wish that some of the characters had more satisfying endings. Characters like Sherma or Grindel. I get Sherma. Sherma has a journey for sure, but there's just something missing from that final moment of Sherma taking on the Bell Keeper's responsibilities and taking care of the people. I don't know, I just wish there was a little last quest or a confrontation or something that gave Sherma a really heroic moment. But, other than missing a few moments like that, they did a great job on the characters. The fleas, I love the flea caravan and that whole journey, and Seth ending up with the fleas. That's all wonderful. To speak about the plot, I didn't really care for the plot. I thought it was fine. Didn't actively diminish my enjoyment of the game, but there was nothing particularly special about it to me. The original Hollow Knight's plot, it's not an insane story by any means. It's not revolutionary, but it's very compelling, in a kind of basic sense. As you're learning about the Pale King and what he did to protect his kingdom, and you're seeing the, failure of that plan, and the sacrifices that people made to try to contain the Radiants. And, I don't know, it was a much stronger story to me than Silksong's. Silksong's, I think, was a little undercut by the complication of, Grandmother Silk is, kind of the bad guy, but then it's are the Weavers actually the bad guys because they set up the Citadel, or did they? I guess so, because the singing is to keep Grandmother Silk asleep. But then I don't even really understand what's happening within the time frame of the game, because the haunting has started, and so Grandmother Silk is controlling people, but she's still asleep, or is she? Is she back at her full power now, or is she half asleep? maybe if I, dug into the lore a little bit more, I would feel a bit more satisfied with it, but it just felt kind of complicated in a not in like an interesting way, just the plot. Yeah, it just didn't satisfy me. But it wasn't, yeah, so I just, was kind of left cold by the plot. It was, functional, but, like, I didn't understand what Grandmother Silk wanted if she was awake. Like, why is she just haunting people and making them kill each other? I guess she wants to haunt everybody, and she's like killing non-haunted people with her haunted servants. I don't really understand what the point of that is. And I guess she's sending out haunted contingents to go like bring weavers back home. Yeah, I don't know. Even if I weren't confused by it, which I am kind of confused by it, it just didn't really compel me. So, and that's fine. I mean, what I love about this game is the gameplay, the mechanical challenge, learning the boss fights and such. So, I didn't need the story to be A+, but yeah, I didn't care for it too much. Also, on that narrative thread, I didn't really click with the world design. So like navigating through the map, didn't really feel like I was navigating through a real kingdom. I didn't understand the reality of the map of these areas. I get it like Kraymore, you're growing grubs to feed the people, but like where do the people live? Where are the villages? When you go into the City of Tears, there's all these houses, and when you're out of the City of Tears, there's like the Mantis home, and there's all these kind of buildings that you're going through, and it feels like you're going through a little society. The reality of Farloom's map didn't really make sense to me, and I didn't understand the mechanics of why certain things are the way they are. Like the lore for Biowater, it talks about how Biowater used to be this beautiful place, but then all of the refuse that the Citadel was dumping kind of toxified Biowater. And I was like, well, okay, but we don't see what the Citadel is dumping. It doesn't seem like, the Citadel isn't coded as this like industrial smokestack hellscape sort of place. It's not pumping out pollution in the way that we normally associate with pollution. There's a lot of like steam, the exhaust organ, there's like steam going around, but we don't see this, this like industrial sludge that would then toxify biowater. And obviously you have the stuff about the grubs, the food supply. They sort of exploded in population and have taken over a lot of areas, so that might be part of it. But that's part of the thing where it was like, oh, they're telling me that biowater was corrupted by by the Citadel's refuse, but I didn't feel that I was shown that in a really visceral way. You know, I didn't feel like you should see, like, what the Citadel is dumping. It should still be functioning. Like, you should see these big caravans of slime or something being poured out into biowater. And then as you're moving through biowater, you know, you see that slime everywhere, and you're like, oh yeah, they destroyed this land. Yeah, I don't know, there's just a lot of weird things with, like, they destroyed Verdania, but then they have Memoriam where they're, like, protecting these places that they're destroying. And, I mean, I'll totally bite the bullet if I just, like, didn't get the game or the design, the world design, the narrative design. But yeah, my personal experience was that I just found it was not a very, like, narratively cohesive world, and was, just kind of left unsatisfied by it, by the world design, by, how the world design tied into the plot and, thematic elements and such. And I also talked about this a bunch in my gameplay video, so I won't linger on it here, but narratively / gameplay-wise, I found getting to Act 3 to be very unsatisfying and awkward. There's no clues given about how to reach Act 3 like there are in Hollow Knight. You know, in Hollow Knight, Hornet tells you to go to the Kingdom's Edge, and then you go there, and you get the King's Crest, right? And then that opens a door where you can then get the Void Dash to go through Void Pillars. So then you're like, oh, I should go back and go through all the Void Pillars. So then you go meet the White Lady, and you know, I feel like things kind of flow into each other, and it's a hard thing to get the true ending. Blind, but not really impossible. I did it blind, you know, partially just because I wanted to explore the whole map. But yeah, there was none of that in Silksong. It didn't feel like this. I don't know, this like unrolling quest to unlock Act 3, and I get it, like, that secret ending stuff is all just in Act 3 itself. It's sort of a different design philosophy. But yeah, I found the process of unlocking Act 3 to be pretty unsatisfying. Because I just stumbled into the bad ending with no hints about how to avoid it. But, yeah, that's just my thoughts on that. I talked about that before, so I won't belabor the point here. Next on my bullet list is Metroidvania, and all I want to say about that is that I just don't like Metroidvanias. It's an unfun genre to me. The Metroidvania conventions are not fun to me. And, you know, in the case of Hollow Knight, the gameplay and narrative and stuff, it saw me through my frustration with the Metroidvania tropes. But the fact that it's a Metroidvania still does decrease my enjoyment of it. You know, for instance, when you get the Silk Soar ability, and now there's all these places around the map that you can use Silk Soar to reach. And so the only thing to do is just, like, wander around the map and look for these little hidden tunnels above you silk sword charge up, and it takes a couple seconds. And if you shoot up and you miss the hole, maybe you think there's not a hole there, or you have to readjust and try again. So that's the kind of stuff in Metroidvanias that I really hate. I think it's so tedious to just go through these areas that you've been in before, and just scour them trying to find new content. And on that note, certain things like when you are trying to collect the hearts in Act 3, and you get one that's like the heart of the shell wood. Oh my god, don't you think that you would get to that boss from the shell wood? Nope. You have to go to a random ass elevator shaft in the Citadel and find a breakable wall. You know how long I was looking for the way to get into Nihileth's area? That drove me nuts. And maybe there is an entrance in the Shellwood. If there's a second entrance, then you can correct me on that. But that was agony, and that's the stuff in Metroidvanias that drives me to insanity. I remember when I was doing the first step of Greyroot's quest, where you're collecting the polyparts, and I was just looking all over the Shellwood for the last polypart. And eventually, when I went to go fight a widow, it was on the path, but stuff like that, where it's like these polyparts are in the Shellwood, but actually you have to go into the Bellheart biome to find the last one. And so I don't need to linger on that, because this just becomes a conversation about why I don't like Metroidvanias, and that's not really related to Silksong. It is obviously because Silksong is a Metroidvania, but it's a broader critique of the genre, and it's not Silksong's fault that it's being a Metroidvania, and I don't like it, right? Some people enjoy that, and so, because they're crazy, because they're insane people, and they love wandering around a map that you've been through 50 times before, trying to find a tiny little sign that indicates that there's new content this way. You people have lost your minds. I'm just kidding. But yeah, it doesn't click with me. So when I think about if I were to give Silksong a rating, I'd probably rank it, or rate it an 8 out of 10. Maybe a 9 out of 10, because I really like the combat. And largely the only reason that points are coming off is just because of Metroidvania stuff that I wouldn't like in any game. But yeah, that's just my thoughts on Metroidvanias, and to the extent that Silksong is a Metroidvania, I don't enjoy it. Okay. My next bullet is music. So, Christopher Larkin composed the music, and he did an incredible job. The music is phenomenal. I adore the music in Silksong. It's perfect. It's thematically appropriate for all the bosses and the areas. Some of the tracks are so beautiful. Bilewater is gorgeous. I love the Widow and First Sinner music. Choral Chambers is great. There's just so many. It's also well designed to fit with wherever you are, or whatever you're fighting, Trobio's music. Trobio, Trobio, Trobio. It's this very, like, pit orchestra for like Andrew Lloyd Webber musical or something. Which just fits so well with Trobio. And all the Weaver bosses use strings, kind of tie in with their spidery silk weaving. I can't say enough about how wonderful the music for Silksong is. It's just phenomenal. So, yeah, I won't, linger on it, because I'll just sit here saying, oh, the Cogwork Dancers music is amazing. Oh, the Cogwork Core music is amazing. I'll just rattle off how good all the music is. But yeah, I just wanted to touch on that and address how phenomenal the music is. And I didn't write this on my bullet list, but I will also call out, art direction, art design, visual design. All the characters are so well made. They just have a lot of personality in their designs, and very distinctive, silhouettes and colors and such. It all looks wonderful. The environments are very pretty. So, great work on the visual design as well. I did write on my paper here, difficulty discourse. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about the difficulty of the game. I don't really know how much I want to talk about this because, I don't know, it's just an endless conversation with games like this, with the Souls-likes and any game in its sort of vaguely in its genre. We have to kind of repeat these difficulty conversations over and over again. And it's fine, but it just gets a little repetitive. I think the game is hard. It's not unfair normally, I think. There's maybe a few moments where it walks the line, but overall I think it was, usually when you die, I feel like you can sort of look at it and say, oh yeah, I could have played that differently and not, taken that damage. And that's a sign of good combat design, right? Sometimes in the arena fights, where you're fighting a bunch of small enemies, it'd be kind of annoying because all of their AIs are, they're not designed to work together explicitly. And so sometimes you can feel like, oh, I had to avoid this guy's attack, but that put me in range of the bomb that had just been thrown, and there was nothing I could do there. And usually there's probably something you could have done, but it's not a super interesting difficulty. I guess what it is it's different than the boss design, right? Because boss difficulty and boss fairness is about the boss acts consistently. This is a fundamental design principle with bosses in these kinds of games. The boss acts the same way every time. It has a certain moveset that will never change. And, it can vary a little bit in the order that it uses moves, where it is when it uses moves, that sort of stuff, but at the end of the day, it's very consistent and reliable. The thing that I think the arenas are testing a little more is, your improvisational abilities, because you cannot rely on those disjointed AIs to operate, simpatico in the same way that like a boss AI operates within itself. And so runs of an arena fight might play out very differently from run to run than the run of a boss fight does by comparison, where the boss fight runs are going to play out very similarly each time, within the confines of the boss's normal changes. Whereas an arena fight can be very, very different because of the randomness of how each enemy's AI is operating. So, yeah, it's just testing a different thing, I guess. It's a different kind of skill that it's testing. And I don't know, fights like the Forum Gauntlet, which is obviously the toughest arena fight in the game. That gauntlet is very difficult, sort of on the merits, but if you're getting needle upgrades and you get Garmin to help you or Chakra to help you, the difficulty goes down a lot. And I don't know, sometimes I see people in the difficulty comments talk about like, well, if you're struggling, you should just go explore more. And that's fine. That's fine advice, but it also ignores the fact that a big part of what these kinds of games are built on, what these difficult games are built on, is this contract, which is like, if you work hard enough, if you learn and improve your skills, you will be able to overcome this challenge on the merits of your strength, of your own skills. That's why stuff like level 1 runs are popular in games like Dark Souls, right? And so I think it's a little disingenuous for somebody to say, I'm struggling with the High Hall Gauntlet. And I think it might be too hard, it might be overtuned. And I'm losing my mind trying to fight it because the enemies are just acting so unpredictably. And then, somebody responds with, well, just go explore more. And it's like, well, yeah, that will help. But also, that's not how... I don't know, it's like, when you encounter a challenge in a video game, oftentimes people want to conquer the challenge. And we've been taught, like, if you find a hard boss, you can just get better at it and win. And the idea of, like, I'm gonna go explore until the challenge isn't even a challenge anymore is sort of, that's fine. That's a fine way to beat it. But I also understand somebody being like, yeah, but I just want to get good at the fight and win. And that's like a valid way to play too. But then if you accept that as a valid way to play, then you have to be open to the conversation about game design, where it's like, is this a well-designed fight for somebody who is not so powerful that they're just going to steamroll it? So, I don't have any, like, conclusions or anything. It's just some rambling thoughts. I think the game is hard. I also think by the time you beat the game, you're gonna think the game is easy. And like, if you started a new game, you would probably be so good compared to when you initially started, and the game won't feel difficulty issues. I don't think Silksong is too hard. I think that there's maybe moments that can be critiqued, certain game design elements that can be critiqued, that's fine. But I think if you're somewhat familiar with these games, Silksong shouldn't be impossible compared to, a FromSoft game, or compared to the original Hollow Knight or whatever. But yeah, those are all of the bullet points that I had on my little card here. So I guess that's the end of my structured review. Is there anything that I missed? Any more comments? I really love, and I'm seeing a lot of this online, how much Team Cherry sort of planned for unique interactions in the game. What if you get to this part of the game with this ability, or without this ability, or yada yada? Or you've never met this character and then they have unique dialogue for this spot. Or you go to Yarnaby while you're covered in maggots, or while you have a lifeblood overdose. And Yarnaby has unique dialogue for that. It's like, in a lot of other games, if you went to Yarnaby with a lifeblood overdose, if a lot of other developers were working on this, there would be no special dialogue. Yarnaby would just say, her usual go away until you have something really nasty in you. But, you can see the passion and the eye for detail, and really wanting to have all of the tiny little paths that a player could take through the game be validated and respected and, seen by Team Cherry. And I think that's a great thing. I really respect that work. So I give it very high praise for that. Anything else sort of jumping to mind? Yeah, I like all the stuff you can kind of, again, even though I don't like Metroidvania elements, I do love all of the content, all the hidden stuff, all of the things you can do and that you don't have to do. I do love exploration games, right? I love open world games when they're well designed. I love Elden Ring. I loved exploring Elden Ring, finding hidden things. And so, even though I don't love the way that exploration is often implemented in Silksong, because of the Metroidvania elements, I do love all of the secret things you can find. Secret little boss fights, the watcher at the edge, right? That con soldier guy. Little things like that where it makes no difference to the game overall if you find it and do it, but it's this wonderful, what it is? It's that, because this is something I love in, Elden Ring. I love when games don't care if you find everything. Games are often so concerned with you finding every piece of content that they made, because, they used all that time and money. They need to get value out of it in terms of player hour count, player engagement, right? And so, companies are often, understandably, they're like, we need to make sure with quests and stuff that all of our content is easily found. respect so deeply with developers like FromSoft and Team Cherry is that they don't care if you miss anything, whether it's, the most hidden secrets, or whether it's like half the game because you just happen to sort of blitz through the main path. It makes no difference to them, and the reason that I like that is because it preserves this, this sense of the mystery of the world, and it makes discoveries really meaningful because you know that not everybody's finding it because you weren't handheld and led to it. So, I do really enjoy that. Anything else? The voice acting is great. All the voice actors did a wonderful job, especially with the singing. That might be kind of all that I have to say about Hollow Knight Silksong. Again, this just kind of a rambling review, so I know that there's things that I forgot that I could have talked about. But yeah, it was great. I loved my time with it. I did have moments of deep frustration, mostly with, the Metroidvania exploration element. Feeling like I was wasting my time. Things like the quests. The quests were often pretty boring. Like when you got quests from the wish board, they were so often like, go down into this cavern and find 11 silver bells, or donate 500 shell shards, or donate 500 rosaries. Go collect pins from dead enemies, go collect cloaks from dead enemies. I find, nothing interesting in that. Just kind of this boring, collectathon style of quest that doesn't really have any interesting narrative to it besides the framing of the quest, and even then, it would have been more satisfying if you do that pilgrim quest where you collect the robes, if then all of the pilgrims in Bone Bottom got new robes and they all, had a cosmetic change. Or when you bring the pins to the first shrine, if, suddenly you had some pilgrims practicing sword fighting in the background, something like that. So that at least those quests had narrative weight, even when they didn't have any, mechanical interest. But that being said, a lot of the quests were good, too, and had fun moments, go find Sherma and White Ward, or, there's, one of the quests points you to Garmon's final fate, stuff like that. And I'll also just say the game is packed with fun surprises. The whole slab experience is great. It's always very exciting when you find a hidden breakable wall and you're exploring and you're like, oh my god, how deep does this secret area go? And then you suddenly get a title card for a new area and you're like, oh my god. And to think that that was just so well hidden, So, I think that about covers it. If I were to put a rating on this game, which ratings are so, I don't know, you can't diminish a whole piece of art to a single number, but I'm gonna do it anyway. And I know I said before I'd give it an 8 or a 9. 9 is definitely as high as it would go. But 8 feels a little low. But I don't know, at the end of the day, when I think of the game, I just kind of remember the fun stuff, fighting the bosses. And I tend to gloss over the hours that I wasted wandering around Shellwood looking for a Paul apart, And that stuff really sucks. And is super unfun. So, I do think an 8 is probably a fair score for my personal preferences. The experience that I had with it, there was a lot of fun to be had, and then some really sharp pain points that I didn't care for. Plus, the sort of world design and narrative and plotline I found a lot less interesting than Hollow Knight, so that was just kind of background and doesn't really raise up the score at all. But yeah, I think that will cap off my review for Hollow Knight. Silksong, 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 Silksong. Let me know if you'd like more Silksong videos. It has been a very large part of this channel now at this point, with the number of videos that I've made about it. I think all that would be left to do would be lore stuff. So, I think it would be fun to read the Hunter's Journal, But, yeah, if there is interest, then I might return to the game, so let me know. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining me, my friends. If you played Silksong, I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did, if not more. And if you haven't and are curious to give it a shot, I hope that you do enjoy it.